Maxed Out Man, helping you become the man you were made to be.
Hey guys, it's Kevin Davis from the Maxed Out Man podcast. This is episode number 20. I'm here with Ryan Parke, who is the men's coach from the UK in England. And Ryan, hey, welcome. I appreciate you joining me. I'm super interested in this. I love the science of mental health, and I know that's one of your specialties. So why don't you give us a little bit more about who you are, how you got into this, and then let's get started. I know you've got some exciting stuff to share with us today.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Kevin. Love the show. Couple of your episodes lately, I was a bit hooked to. I was like, I need to stop listening and go to a meeting, but I just want to learn a little bit more. So yeah, love the show. Really pleased to be here. And I think the best thing I can do for your listeners is tell you what got me into all this, because
Absolutely.
in June 2019, I saw a lady who I hadn't seen in years, and I was really excited to hear the latest about her son, because her son, Brad, was taller than me, more muscular. Some would say slightly better looking. I disagree on that one, but,
You're a pretty good looking guy, you know.
I think so. An argument could be made, though, that he was better looking than me, if you can believe that, Kev. And he had a fast car, a big house, a great job. And I like to think I was on the same trajectory as Brad, but I was about 2 years behind. And then I saw the look on his mum's face, and I thought, what did I say? And she said, oh, Ryan, you're asking me about Brad. You don't know. Brad's killed himself.
Oh, man.
And it hit me like a truck, because I wasn't expecting it. I had two paradigms, two beliefs at the time that really summed up what I knew about mental health. At the time, I thought that when men are successful, they'll be happy. And Brad was the most successful man I knew. And then the other thing that I believed, I don't know if you hear it where you are, Kevin, but where I am in the UK, what we hear all the time is the reason why men have worse mental health outcomes than women when it comes to suicide is because men just don't talk enough. I don't know if you hear that a lot.
Yeah, I probably had like 3 of those conversations this week talking about kind of the, whether it's relational or they're, talking or any of that. So absolutely.
So I used to hear that all the time. I heard what we all hear. And yet Brad was the best communicator I knew as well. So 2 years before he died, he went to the doctors and said, help, I'm depressed. And they put him on a course of antidepressants. And they also prescribed him therapy. They referred him to a therapist. And he did a round of cognitive behavioral therapy, a round of interpersonal therapy. And 2 months before he died, his mum said, Brad, call me every night and tell me how you feel. So we hear all the time that men need to talk. Brad did everything that we tell men to do, and yet he's not around anymore.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was so shocked, Kev. Like it didn't make sense. I thought, no. He did everything he was told. And Brad's mum, Jenny, she lectures in mental health. And she said to me, Ryan, you should learn about this, because the situation's similar in the US, right? But over here in the UK, every 5 hours, 4 people die from suicide. 3 of them are men. 75% of our suicides are men. And the situation's really similar all over the Western world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I took what Jenny said really seriously. That was June 2019. And I set aside 1 day every week from then until the end of the year to learn everything I could about my own mental health. And I'm no saint, Kev, but I didn't do this for everyone else. I did this because I'm a man and I need to know for me.
Right.
So the first week that I'm learning about this stuff, I had no background in mental health. I had no medical training, nothing like that. I didn't even go to university. I left school at 15, right? So I'm starting at the very top, and I started with studies on men's life expectancy.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the studies I was reading just mentioned that in the US and in Europe, there's 1 day every year where a man's chances of having a heart attack jump up by 30%. And on the same day, women's chances of having a heart attack go down significantly. Do you know what day that is?
It's on the tip of my tongue, but actually, no, I actually just had this conversation not too long ago, but share.
Yeah, no worries. Don't worry. I didn't know. And I've been asking this question for years. Even heart surgeons don't answer this question properly. So the one day every year where you and me and all the men we know are 30% more likely to have a heart attack, even though women are less likely, is the Monday after the clocks change and we lose an hour.
Oh, man. Yeah. That's why I stay in bed those days.
Yeah. And that's good advice. There's other ways to combat it as well. But staying in bed, that's a legitimate strategy. And so I read that and I remember thinking, why is that? Like, what the hell? Well, that study didn't have the answers, but a couple of other studies did know what caused that phenomenon. So what happens is, if you miss 1 hour's sleep, what it does to you is different depending on whether you're male or female.
Interesting.
And so in a man's body, missing just 1 hour's sleep lowers our testosterone for days. And in a man's body, as testosterone goes down, our chances of having a heart attack go up.
Mm.
And I thought, that's interesting, because I was born in 1990. I was 29 at the time. I'm 33 now. And my whole life, I had never heard anything good about testosterone.
Yeah, because testosterone is the evil solution that runs through men's bodies that makes us terrible, right? That's
exactly.
That's the narrative, right?
Yeah, 100%. It does nothing good. In fact, like, this will probably make you laugh, right? But when I was a kid and there was a fight in my local bar, my parents would say, well, my mum's friends would say, of course they ended up fighting. The testosterone in that room was sky high.
Yep, yeah.
So I was reading this study years ago about testosterone stopping men from having heart attacks. And I thought, what? How can a hormone that makes men fight in bars also protect them from having heart attacks? That's really weird. So I decided next week I'm going to learn everything I can about testosterone. The first thing I decided to research is, why does testosterone make men aggressive? It turns out it doesn't.
Right.
That myth was disproved back in the 70s. So testosterone, not only does it not make men aggressive, but low testosterone is associated with aggression. Testosterone regulates our emotions.
Can you go into that a little bit more? I'd love the science part of that.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do, one of the myths that we're going to bust is exactly how testosterone grips your emotions. And it's really interesting because it answers a lot of questions about lifestyle. But what it also does is, do you have a friend who, whenever his team loses, he's in a bad mood?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is it like just about every guy you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Any of my friends, I'm not really a huge sports guy, but I know tons of people that are, and you see it on social media and all that stuff. So yeah, anybody I know, and in my case, it's, F1 or NASCAR or whatever. Same example.
Yeah, that's it. Like, your team loses, bad mood. Team wins, good mood. It doesn't matter if you scratch your car down the wall outside. If your team won, you're like, oh, damaged car, Super Bowl, baby.
Right.
Whereas when your team loses, your car being in one piece is a problem. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about that in some detail and how testosterone and emotions are related. But actually, I'm just going to carry on talking about general health in men, because otherwise, if we do it this way around, then when we get to emotions in men, it's going to make a lot more sense.
Go for it.
And so,
and I should be full disclosure. I've been on TRT for like 2 years, and yeah. I'm 50, so I'm quite a bit older than you. And so I have an artificial level of testosterone that puts me closer to what I should be, which is probably closer to where you are naturally. So,
well, who knows, right? Like, I'm not regularly getting my testosterone tested, but when we talk about symptoms of low testosterone, then it's quite easy to know if you have a problem.
Absolutely.
And so, so we're in this situation where I find out testosterone doesn't cause aggression, and then I'm learning more about it. And while I was trying to find out why it protects a man's heart, I find this other study which just mentions that the average depressed man has 30% less testosterone than the average non-depressed man.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that's really interesting because, so what we're talking about, these statistics are going to vary from country to country. But let me tell you about the UK in 2019.
Which is probably just based on, society and diet and exercise and all of that. Probably is is very similar, I would think, to anyone in the Western world. So I would assume that it's pretty similar in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be really similar. And so at the time, our biggest killer from 18 to 45 in men was suicide. Now it's the biggest killer of men from 18 to 50 because it keeps growing.
Wow.
But the biggest killer of men, 18 to 45, suicide. Suicide is linked to depression, not in all cases, but in most instances, according to the World Health Organization. And depression in men is linked to low testosterone. Then the biggest killer of men at the time from 45 to 60 is heart disease. Heart disease, heart attack, and heart failure in men, all linked to low testosterone. And so I wondered, well, what happens after the age of 60? The biggest killer of men in the UK at the time after the age of 60 is cancer. Was cancer, still is, but it was then as well. The most likely cancer a man will get is prostate cancer.
Directly related to testosterone.
Exactly. In fact, studies have found that men who have low testosterone are 2.5 times more likely to develop prostate cancer in the near future.
That's super interesting, because I know one of the scare tactics that they use against TRT is, oh, you're going to get prostate cancer if you do that, which is the exact opposite of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And then another thing that interests me about prostate cancer is there's a level of testosterone that if you get below this threshold, then you're massively at risk of getting prostate cancer. You might be interested in knowing, because if you're on TRT, you probably know a little bit about the metrics, but it's 350 nanograms per deciliter. So once you get below that, you're at big risk of prostate cancer. Well, funnily enough, that's the same threshold that's been identified as the risk for depression in men. So there's almost like this minimum functional level that you need to achieve with testosterone, right?
I was at 267 before I got on TRT, by the way, at 46 years old.
So you would have been like 2.5 times more at risk of prostate cancer than the average guy, right? Yeah. So when I learned these things, I was like, hold on a minute. My whole life, I've never heard anything good about testosterone. And yet it turns out it's like vital for men's mental health, physical health, and life expectancy. And just about everything finds this. There was even a study in Washington that it had blood samples of men and it tracked what happened to them during COVID. And the men who had low testosterone before COVID broke out were much more likely to be hospitalized and much more likely to die from long COVID or from COVID and develop long COVID than men who had healthy levels. So it's like the hormone that keeps us alive, basically. It's our body's way of knowing, this is an important guy, keep him alive.
Yeah. And there's corollaries, I'm assuming, with the COVID research because, one of the biggest factors they said was obesity and lack of exercise and all that. And so I'm sure that there's a corollary between low testosterone and all of those factors as well. So, I mean, it's like, it's magic. I can tell you right now that if it wasn't for TRT, I would be in the back of my closet, fat and crying like a little baby. Like it literally, it changed my life. So.
Yeah, and it's amazing. And the conversation we're going to have is going to be it's going to be about the advantages of taking testosterone, of making testosterone rather than
taking it. Right. Yeah, I understand.
So for most guys, it's not a case of taking it. It's a case of lifestyle, right?
Absolutely.
But yeah, there are circumstances where guys think, I should be taking it, and they've got the education and they know about it and they're willing to take it for the rest of their lives. And if that's the case, then you're talking to someone about taking testosterone. But for now, we're talking about making it, right? Making it natural.
Yeah, because in my case, just as a side note there, like I work out 6 days a week. I lift weights 6 days a week. I eat a high protein diet. Like if you look at all of these are the factors to make good levels of testosterone. I kind of hit all of those things and still had low testosterone. So then it's like, okay, well, let's look at doing something about it. But there's so many lifestyle options prior to that you can do, which is what you're going to talk about. And so that's just that's my little disclaimer about TRT. And it's not roiding out and trying to get to 5,000 serum level and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's downsides to that, right? What we're talking about when we talk about TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, is like the amount you're told to take, not what you think, hold on, I want an 8-pack in 9 days. Right. And so I was learning all these good things about testosterone and what it does. And then I thought my next question was, okay, so it's so important for us. What are the key ingredients for a healthy level of testosterone? And so that's when I started learning about, I'd always heard that as you age, when you're a man, your testosterone goes down every year. But actually, lifestyle is a much bigger indicator of your testosterone than your age. Your age is largely irrelevant compared to your lifestyle.
Absolutely.
And do you know what the number one affecting factor is, Kevin, for natural levels of testosterone? The number one key ingredient?
I would say nutrition, but I may be wrong.
So nutrition is really important. It's definitely in the top 4. But it seems that the single thing that has the most effect is, it goes back to that heart attack problem from earlier. It's sleep. So studies have found that missing just 1 hour of sleep temporarily lowers your testosterone by this equivalent of 12 years of age.
Wow.
So I'm 33. If I miss 1 hour sleep and just get 7 hours, my testosterone will dip. So it's equivalent to a 45-year-old man who just had a good night's sleep.
Wow.
And if I miss 2 hours, it stacks. So then I'm up to a 57-year-old man who just had a good night's sleep. So sleep is massively important for us. And I didn't know that.
No, and that's probably why I'm screwed, because I have been a poor sleeper since I was a child. So like that's, I know it's a factor. It's a factor that I haven't been able to solve, or correct reasonably. So that probably definitely a factor in my case, I'm sure.
And then it compounds, right? Because one of the symptoms of low testosterone is poor sleep.
Right. It's that vicious cycle.
Yeah. And when it comes to men's health, it's all vicious cycles and virtuous cycles. It's like when it starts going wrong, it gets harder to fix.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you start doing it right, it gets easier and easier to do the right things. There's loads of examples of this in male mental health, where it's like, there's about 5 specific dimensions to male mental health, and all of them, there's vicious and virtuous cycles in them. You've just got to kickstart the right ones. So the first thing is sleep. And the next one is what you were speaking about a minute ago. It's exercise. Specifically, it's cardio.
Interesting.
And so, the recommendations that in the UK from like our NHS, who give out advice on health, and they provide healthcare to us, they say every adult should be getting 2.5 hours of exercise a week. And then specifically, we should be doing 20 to 30 minutes a day. And so I think lots of men don't know that as well.
Yeah.
And there was an amazing study that came out in February this year, and it looked at how 130,000 people had recovered from stress, anxiety, and depression. And it found that one thing was much more effective than medicine, medication, and much more effective than CBT, which is a form of talk therapy. Mm-hmm. That one thing was exercise.
Yeah.
It's more effective than any other treatment, really. And it also is much cheaper than any other treatment.
I mean, for the most part, it can be free. That's the scary thing. Like, it doesn't, for basic health, it doesn't take anything.
Yeah. Just get trainers on and get outside, right? Mm-hmm. Having said that, when you're depressed, you don't feel like doing it.
No. Yeah. So which is part of that cycle, right?
Yeah. Tons of cycles. So the first one we've got here, if we want a healthy level of testosterone, is we've got to be sleeping 8 hours a night. The next thing is we've got to be exercising most days, like at least 5 days out of the week and for at least 20 minutes a day. And then we come to diet, which you mentioned. Now, of course, the nutrients that go in, that's really important. But actually, one of the most important factors is whether or not you make your food yourself or whether it's processed.
Yes.
So men who make their own food have much healthier levels of testosterone than men who eat lots of processed food, because a couple of reasons. Number one, Kevin, I know you love sugar, man.
Yeah, I do. I've said that multiple times. And my wife is a pastry chef and baker. So, imagine like an alcoholic living in a bar. So
it's the perfect time, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so what happens when we're eating sugar, and processed food is full of sugar, but also sugary foods are full of sugar.
Yeah.
But while our body's making insulin, it's no longer making testosterone.
Mm.
And my partner, Emma, she's a pharmacist. And I said to her one day, I was like, why would your body stop making testosterone to make insulin? Because testosterone is vital for your physical and mental health. And she said, Ryan, sugar is so bad for you. It's an acid in your blood. It's attacking your nerves. So your body's like, screw everything. Screw testosterone. Screw human growth hormone. Screw everything. We need insulin and we need it now.
That's crazy because most people don't think about that as a component of the fight or flight response, right? But in that case, it totally is. Like it's the body, its body's method of survival at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And quite interestingly, actually, so insulin takes the sugar from your blood and puts it in your cells. And then you mentioned fight or flight. So often when we talk about fight or flight, we're talking about cortisol, right? Cortisol does the opposite. It takes it from your cells and puts it in your blood.
So it's this fight.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's what it does basically is by putting all of the sugar in your blood, raising your blood pressure. What that means is now if you need to run or if you need to fight, you've got the energy in your system ready to go anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those two are like opposites in that way. And then the other problem that we have at the moment is pesticides, which go a lot more in processed foods than in whole foods. And pesticides in our body look like estrogens.
Yeah.
So your body's getting this mixed signal of estrogens. It thinks they're estrogens floating around in your blood. So it's going to make less testosterone. And this is thought to be one of the reasons why levels of testosterone have nearly halved since the 50s because of the hormones and chemicals that are going into our bodies through our diets now. And then we've got a fourth thing as well. So after we've got sleep is really important and diet and exercise, or should I say exercise and diet, the other thing is vitamin D, which comes from the sun.
Mm-hmm.
And when I learned that list of things, like I can swear on this show, can't I, Kevin?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Excellent. So when I saw that list of things that men need for a healthy level of testosterone, I remember thinking, oh shit. Because I knew Brad, who died from suicide, and I know, he did everything we tell men to do. But really, he was working so hard that sleep, diet, exercise, and sunshine, they just wouldn't have been anywhere near his list of priorities. And I started to realize that trying to be a man is something that kills a lot of men.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I would assume on the vitamin D front that you guys, so I live in Montana, which we're like the 45th parallel. So we're, if you look at globe, we're similar in yours in terms of your latitude. However, you guys, I mean, it's the joke, right? Like the UK, it rains all the time. Oh, yeah. We have these long winters where we don't get sunshine. I used to tell people we put our kids on the bus at 7:30 a.m. They get off the bus and it's dark. They get off the bus at 4 and it's dark. Like that's how short our days can be during the wintertime. So getting vitamin D is very, very difficult for us. And I assume the similar thing in the UK.
Yeah. And then if you cast time back, right, most of the jobs in the past, you had to be outside to do them. Mm-hmm. Like realistically, what could you do indoors? Not very much. You got to farm indoors. Right. There's very few jobs you can historically that you've been able to do indoors. Now, most jobs are indoors because you need your PC in front of you. Mm-hmm. And so even if it was overcast, rainy, cloudy, being outdoors in that means you're getting some sunshine.
Right.
Whereas now it's like, it could be sunny outside, you're inside. So actually the weather's becoming less relevant as we're just hiding away. Yeah. The weather sucks in the UK for sure. But at least I'll get some of it if I'm outside.
Right. Even if you're inside with, and you have an exposure to sun or whatever, a lot of these windows, like my windows are low E windows on my house, which limits the UV that comes through on purpose because of heat and, exposure and all that. So you're even if you're sitting there next to a window, and it's sunny outside, you're not getting the kind of UV exposure that you need.
Yeah. It's really about getting outside and getting it on you. And so this was like, all we've spoken about so far, Kevin, is like my first couple of days learning about male mental health. Right. And I've been studying it obsessively for 4.5 years since. And I use this stuff in the coaching, in the workshops I do, in the talks, that kind of thing. But what we've covered so far was this realization that, hold on a minute, my lifestyle dictates my hormones. And my hormones are big influence on my physical and mental health. So it kind of started making me realize that actually as men, we've got this, yeah, it's a challenge in a way, but it's also an opportunity. We've got a lot of ownership over our mental health in a way, because if you have the right tools, then you know how to look after yourself, get that testosterone up. And that's a really good thing. The downside is society is so critical of testosterone at the moment for no actual reason. So because of this, it's like society is killing a conversation that men actually need to have about how to look after ourselves and avoid these massive killers.
Yeah. And I don't know how it is in the UK in terms of the numbers. And most people I don't think realize this, and feel free to correct me or talk to this, but in the US, when you get your testosterone tested, they will look at these numbers that they assign to normality are completely ludicrous. Like so over the last 70 years, let's say since the 50s, testosterone levels across the board have gone down. So rather than say, hey, wait, we have an issue with this. This is something that we need to be looking at and helping people fix. They said, let's just lower the standards. So then the old norms became, they're irrelevant. Is that something that you found with kind of the research you've done?
Yeah, that is something I've found. And where it's resting at the moment is almost like when you get belief this level, like monsters be here. Yeah. Just bad stuff happens, basically.
Yeah.
So it's like what we're trying to do at the moment is like just work out when men are past this terrible point when actually suboptimal is a problem. But, the key thing about it really is just this realization that actually we've all got a lot of power in our hands, which is if we know what to do, then we can actually start to do really effective things for better mental health.
Yeah. And it's not like we're got to do acrobatics every day. I mean, it's not, it's really just a series of simple choices that make all the difference in the world.
And so that everything I've spoken about so far, everything we've spoken about so far, that's all to do with, let's refer to that as like baseline testosterone, right?
Okay.
Baseline testosterone is how much testosterone you have based on your lifestyle, assuming that your body's functional, assuming that your balls are working and that kind of thing. Pituitary gland firing on all cylinders. But then there's another aspect to testosterone as well. It doesn't seem to have a name yet. So I've kind of called it dynamic testosterone for now. And this is where testosterone gets really interesting. Remember, we were talking about the guys who feel down or angry when their team loses. Well, this kind of explains that. And to understand dynamic testosterone, first we're going to look at one of our cousins, which is the rhesus monkey. So this guy's a little monkey with a long tail, right?
Right.
So he's related to us because he's a primate, but they don't drive a car to work or anything like that. But their brains are similar in that they use hormones in similar ways. And the reason why it's useful to have this conversation is because the scientists know a lot about the rhesus monkey and how he uses testosterone. So let's say there's two monkeys and they both spot one banana. I'm not being stereotypical to monkeys, just I believe they eat bananas. It's just bananas, right?
How terrible of you to assume that the monkey ate a banana.
Did you just assume my food?
That's right.
So in that instance, right, we've got two male monkeys, one banana. Before they see the banana, they both have baseline levels of testosterone. But as soon as they see the banana, the testosterone levels of both male monkeys jumps up by 3, 4, or 5 times.
Wow.
So in nature, that's a massive increase. That's like off the chart, right?
Yeah.
Now, both monkeys have a really high level of testosterone. And what happens next depends on the outcome. So let's say there's, I don't know, a monkey called Kevin and a monkey called Ryan. And Kevin's a bit bigger. And Kevin shows Ryan his teeth. And Ryan goes, screw this.
I'm out.
Any part of this, it's just a banana. So what happens as soon as there is an outcome? Monkey Kevin's won. Well, Monkey Kevin's testosterone jumps up by an additional 20%. So winning has a big impact on the level of testosterone that's in Monkey Kevin's blood. Now,
Monkey Kevin's looking for the nearest female at that point.
Probably, yeah. And now Monkey Ryan, as soon as he loses, his testosterone plummets by 90%.
Holy cow.
So the key thing here is it's now below baseline. And what Monkey Ryan does is he actually leaves the group and isolates for a couple of days. He doesn't even come out to eat. So when you look at that, and if you think, what would that behavior be like if that monkey was a human? Well, it's kind of depression, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've got this relationship in male rhesus monkeys between their performance and, you could almost say, their mental health. But then this was back in the 70s we're talking about that these studies were done. In the 80s, scientists got really excited because they realized you could measure the level of testosterone in a man's body, in his blood, by measuring what was in his saliva.
Okay.
So that's really exciting because not everyone will give you their blood, but anyone will spit in a bucket, right?
Right.
Like, who cares? And so the next thing the scientists did is they followed a group of male professional tennis players into a knockout tennis tournament. And what they found is 2 days before the game, the players had baseline levels of testosterone. Day of the game, massive increase in testosterone. And then the scientists could tell with 100% accuracy, just by looking at the results, which man had won and which man had lost.
That's crazy.
So the winner's testosterone jumps up further, the loser's comes crashing down. And have you ever seen that image, Kev, of like the male tennis player, and he's so frustrated, he's smashing his racket up?
Yeah, John McEnroe.
So when you see these guys and they're so angry, right, did they just win or did they just lose?
Right, absolutely. You know that they lost.
Yeah.
And this is the point. They may not have lost the game, but at least some of those guys are doing it point by point.
Yeah. And this is when scientists started to realize that actually testosterone is not associated with aggression. Low testosterone is associated with aggression.
That's awesome.
Because like no one wins the game and then goes rah and smashes their right. And this was like back in the 80s that this was found out. So this is when the news should have got out that, oh, no, testosterone doesn't make men aggressive. Low testosterone does. We'll talk in a minute about like why it looks like testosterone does. But, sort of the main thing here is like scientists realize, hold on a minute, winning's very good. Something else they found out was that a tennis match is a bit different to a monkey fight. One of the ways it's different is it's played in sets. So the scientists actually had set-by-set information on testosterone. And what they could see is... Go on, you're going to ask something.
Oh, I was just going to... Go ahead. Finish your thought, and then I'll ask.
No worries. So what they could see is the man who won the first set got a little boost of testosterone. And 60% of the time, he went on to win the whole match. And this is interesting because... this happens in male sports all the time and not in female sports. So in female sports, who wins the first set is not a good predictor of who will win. But in male sports, who wins the first set is a really reliable indicator of who's going to win the match. It's more reliable than their age, their experience. It's the best indicator, and it came to be known as the winner effect. And something we can all learn from this is when you're male, there's a big payoff from reaching your goals quickly, from seeing some progress, right? And we can all use.
I mean, if you put that across everything, I mean, all of life is that the more you win, the more you win. Like it's almost that kind of cover, and that's interesting that they have a scientific explanation for that.
Yeah, it's like when you win, your body's going, "Oh, hold on, we can do this. Give Kevin more of what he needs. We want more testosterone, better mental health, better physical health, more concentration."
It's how do those relate to like dopamine and norepinephrine and adrenaline and because obviously those are a response to similar stimuli. How does that relate?
Actually, especially talking about norepinephrine, which I tend to call noradrenaline, just because, two nations divided by the same language.
right, there you go.
All that jazz. But so norepinephrine has a really key part to play in why men are aggressive when they drink. So what I'll do is I'll talk to you. Yeah, I'll talk to you about sort of these results in sports a little bit more, because there's actually a way there for us to move across into norepinephrine and adrenaline and cortisol in a bit more detail. Hey, that's deep, man. We could do a podcast about dopamine.
Well, you'll have to come back and we'll do it again.
Yeah, the main thing to know about dopamine is, I don't know how to say this, but dopamine's not always your friend.
Right. Absolutely.
Especially if you're extroverted. So scientists can tell by looking at one part of your brain how extroverted you are, because in this particular part of your brain you have more dopamine receptors.
Mm-hmm. What
that means is the more receptors you have to something, the more sensitive you are for it. Your body's basically hunting for it.
Right.
So what this means is, in extroverts, they are very, very sensitive to dopamine. Or
they need that external stimuli all the time in order to...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or you could almost say it's more powerful to them. Mm-hmm. So it's a big distraction, right? Because I can work here on my own, but I almost don't have the thing that I need. I'm in like a dopamine desert because I know how good it is when I leave the desert and I'm at a party or something. So for extroverts, it's almost like we have this problem with intention, which is what you intend to do versus the first thing that's going to get your attention and give you some dopamine. That is a constant battle, your intention versus your attention, where then they're going in different places because you're so sensitive to dopamine.
Wow.
So yeah, went off on a bit of a tangent there, but
I derailed the conversation a little bit.
No, it's all good. So in my coaching program, it's not a plug. It's just, I think this is so important that we literally have a 90-minute workshop that's just going into detail about how dopamine screws you up.
Oh wow! Yeah, we'll definitely, but we'll talk about that. Get the links and get you guys, get some help there for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So then we looked at tennis players, right? The winner, his testosterone goes up. So after that, the scientists that carried out those trials, they thought, well, hold on a minute. What if the testosterone wasn't responding to the competition? What if it was responding to the physical stimuli of playing tennis? So they decided to do another study, but this time on human male chess players.
Yeah, that's the exact opposite physically.
Yeah, exactly. It's like two complete opposites, right? So these chess players, they're sitting in their chair, they're not running around, they're not hitting a ball, they don't have to be athletes. Maybe they are athletes, I don't know, but they don't have to be. And what they found is 2 days before their knockout chess tournament, baseline levels of testosterone, just like the tennis players. Well, maybe different, but similar. Then on the day of the competition, massive increase in testosterone, the same as we saw with the tennis players. And then after the chess games, winner, jump up in testosterone, loser, their testosterone falls off a cliff. So you don't even need to be doing anything physical. Your body is always tracking, did you win or did you lose? And
that's like blowing my mind.
Yeah. And so they found something else really interesting in this chess tournament, right? Which is every now and again, a man won a chess game, but his testosterone didn't get that little boost afterwards. They noticed that with the tennis players sometimes, but because they were just learning, they didn't feel the need to ask about this specific phenomenon. But now we got to the chess game, the scientists had learned a lot more, and they wanted to know what caused that victory that didn't reward the guy. So they reached out to the chess players and said, can you tell us about that game you won? And in all instances, the chess players said, oh, I shouldn't have won, man. My opponent made a mistake.
So there was no like satisfaction in actually doing it yourself.
Yeah. There's no satisfaction in not getting it done yourself. Yeah. So like if your opponent makes a mistake, or if you win by random luck, just sheer chance, your opponent pots the black ball, something like that, at the same time as the white, then there's no reward for you. Winning fairly is really important for male mental health.
Interesting.
And then we move across to another study, which gets even closer to home. And this is the one that answers all the questions. So in 1995, scientists went to Europe because the soccer World Cup was on, and it was Brazil versus Italy. Yeah, I believe that's when it happened anyway. I'm not a football fan, but, I'm not a soccer fan. So
football, we know what it is there.
Yeah, cool. Actually, so I'm normally call it soccer because I actually do follow the NFL and I'm a New Orleans Saints fan,
Oh, okay.
which is really antisocial when you're in the UK. But my
Absolutely.
stepdad,
Yeah, you're not allowed to follow American football, right?
yeah, it's like it gets to 1 a.m. and I'm like, oh, prime time, baby.
Nice.
So then, when these scientists went to Europe, they weren't studying football players; they were studying fans who were watching the game on TV. And what they found is 25 minutes before the game started, baseline levels of testosterone. During the game, massive increase in testosterone. After the end of the game, the Brazilian fans' testosterone had gone up massively, and the Italian fans' testosterone had gone down massively. Kevin, guess who won?
How the Brazil, right?
Yeah, exactly. Brazil was... And so we've got this situation here where looking at just watching your team win or lose has a massive impact on a man's mental health. You're riding a roller coaster of testosterone, which is translating into a roller coaster of emotion. And it's there for a good reason. Because like nowadays in 2023, if I'm watching my team lose, it's because, I don't know, the Saints are just doing really badly this evening or something. You know, like, oh, someone should have blocked him. But 10,000 years ago, if I was watching my team lose, it means that like caveman Ryan is watching caveman Kevin get ripped apart by a bear.
Right.
So I can't come over to the bear and say, hey, Mr. Bear, it's nice that you came here, but would you mind leaving? Because this is kind of our private property. And if you knew Kevin, I know he's very tasty, but he's also a very nice guy. Like, you can't do that, right? The bear will just eat you next.
Right.
So what happens is I see you're losing, you're my team, and my body is going to lower my testosterone really, really fast. And the way it's going to do that is by releasing, we don't need to go into too much detail, but an enzyme called aromatase is pumped around your system, which breaks testosterone up into estrogens. And a man with low testosterone and high estrogen is very irritable.
So when they say stop acting like a girl, if you're throwing up, you know, there's some truth to that, actually. If you have more estradiol, you know, I'm not gonna. This is a man's podcast, so I can say stuff like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's like we've got this. It's kind of okay to call it a female hormone. The reality is, men use estrogen and women use testosterone as well, but actually, men have like 20 to 60 times more testosterone than women. So it'd be fair to say it's a male hormone. But yeah, it is a bit like female hormones in men causes real problems.
Right.
Or at least it does something bad that nature intends for it to do. Because you got to fight a bear. You need to be angry, man.
Yeah.
So I was working with a guy years ago, and when his football team lost, he was in a terrible mood. In fact, he used to be so depressed that his relationship with his girlfriend was strained. He couldn't get to the gym on Mondays and he'd be late for work. And I took him through this science and he was like, oh, hold on. You're saying that just watching my football team win is going to boost my testosterone? I said, yeah. He said, okay, next time I see my team lose, I'm going to watch them win. I said, how are you going to do that? He was like, I'm just going to go on YouTube.
Yeah.
Said, sure, try it. So a week later, I get a text message of his girlfriend. And she's saying, like, hey, I don't know what you're doing with my boyfriend, but he's a new man. Thank you. And so this is why I love male mental health, because like, if you are really suffering after your football team loses and you go to a psychiatrist, you're probably going to be told that you care too much about football. There's something wrong. We need to look into your past and work out. No. Use it. If you're about to walk on stage, if you're about to do a business deal, if you're about to go and visit a client, you should know that watching a video of your team win, even if it's years old, is going to give you a boost. So like this last year, the Saints were playing like utter crap. And
which I think for the Saints is, you know, par for the course over the history of that team. But
I could have said for the last decade, really, playing like crap. So, you know, sorry guys, love you, but come on, you know, throw me a bone here. So So what happened last season a lot, Kevin, was I'd watch the Saints get their butts kicked. And then I'd come home, because I used to watch with my stepdad. I'd get in bed with my fiance because it's 3 a.m. And Emma would say to me, "Oh, you're in a good mood. The Saints obviously won." And I'd go, no, they lost. And she goes, "Why are you in such a good mood?" I'd say, "Oh, well, I just watched them win the Super Bowl." She was like, "Wasn't that 12 years ago? You guys are weird."
Yeah, absolutely.
But we've got this secret weapon, right? And because no one is looking at testosterone in any real detail, most experts don't even know this, that we've got this super weapon, which is anytime we want, we can just watch our favorite football team win or sports team, and it's going to give us a boost to our physical and mental health. That's
crazy.
And then if we're looking at one of the hormones that you mentioned was norepinephrine. So, or I'll call it noradrenaline if that's okay. It's the same thing. It's just it means that I'm used to saying it and I won't mess it up so much. So what's really interesting is what we hear about a lot in the UK is domestic violence and intimate partner violence going up on game days. So there's a lot of evidence of that, right? And then this organization years ago in the UK, they started studying it. And what they found is on days in the UK when football teams played, the rates of domestic violence jumped up by like 25%. And it went up even further on days when the team lost. So you look at that and it's like, okay, so testosterone goes up during competition. Well, that means surely the testosterone is driving aggression. No, hold on. Let's look at this in a bit more detail, right? So on days where the team plays, domestic violence goes up. On days where the team loses, that's when testosterone goes down, and that's when violence is at its highest. So we've got that correlation again, which is low testosterone equals aggression. But there was another thing that was noticed during this study as well, which is they managed to isolate couples where the man was a football fan, but he wasn't drinking that day. And in these instances, no matter what the result, no additional domestic violence whatsoever. And so what happens, if we understand what happens to a man's brain when he drinks alcohol, when you drink alcohol, your testosterone goes down. But what goes up is noradrenaline or norepinephrine. And that's been associated with aggression, with PTSD, with all kinds of behavioral problems, really in men. And like, we know that men who were kicked out of the US Marines for being too aggressive to follow orders, the one thing that was different about them and the other men in the group is really high levels of noradrenaline, norepinephrine in their system. And so we've got this weird situation where in most of the circumstances where we blame testosterone for bad behavior, it's not testosterone, it's probably norepinephrine or noradrenaline that's causing this bad behavior. And we're blaming it on the hormone that's just gone down, as opposed to the one that's just gone up.
That's insane. That's so crazy.
So I know we covered a lot of science there, but yeah, it's nice to talk about because it really gives men, I find, a lot of hope and understanding of how their bodies work and how they can use it as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically we're talking, obviously testosterone is a hugely important hormone in our bodies. This is all brand new for me. I love the science part of it. I could talk about that all day, but it's something that is completely counterintuitive to what the narrative, we love to use this phrase, what the narrative is now, but it's true. Even the medical community, first of all, the medical community is terrible with exercise, nutrition, all of those factors. They're not well educated. They don't communicate it very well. But especially when it comes to male hormones, it doesn't really know it doesn't have all this information. And my wife gets really frustrated too, because she's like, hey, look, you have this low testosterone, you can take these shots twice a week and then you're fixed. And she's 49, she's almost 52. So she's starting to deal with some of the, premenopausal and all that stuff. And it just pisses her off because she's like, they don't know anything about, any of this stuff other than some base HRT stuff and all that. But it's this, I find this fascinating to know that low testosterone is the culprit in what a lot of these male related things that we're dealing with.
Yes, that's right. There's one way that testosterone can be associated with aggression. And the studies that found this were looking at exogenous testosterone. So men who were injecting it, taking it rather than making it, right? And so when as you'll know, it is something that, that is discussed when you do TRT, is when you start taking testosterone, your body will stop making it, right?
Right.
Now, it's not the end of the world because you're taking testosterone anyway. So you're getting it from somewhere. You're just not making it yourself. But the only downside with it really is that, we were talking about how your testosterone fluctuates when you need it because of dynamic testosterone. So you no longer have dynamic testosterone. So if you're in a challenge situation, your cortisol is going to go up, your adrenaline, your epinephrine is going to go up, and your noradrenaline, your norepinephrine is going to go up as well. And they're all stress factors. But you no longer have the testosterone to rise up and put the brakes on. And that's why some studies found that men who were dosing on testosterone they did have behavioral issues that they didn't have otherwise.
Did they have a baseline number that they were kind of working off of in terms of serum testosterone, or what the
not that I know of. No, not that I know of. But one of the problems with this area of research is that there just isn't that much information around it, and the studies are really disjointed and often on really small groups. But yeah, so I can't guide you in terms of the serum levels or anything, but it does seem that that's the only way that you can really say, testosterone is associated with aggression, which is if you're dosing it and you're in a really stressful situation, you tend to lose some of the calming effect that testosterone has, because normally it would rise up to protect you.
Yeah, and it's important to note that guys that are on, as they call it, guys that are on gear.
Yeah.
Which is so, like, for me, for example, I'll have a 200 milligram bottle, and that bottle may last me 10 weeks. Right. So that level of dosing is like, I take 0.5 twice a week, and that kind of keeps my levels. It goes up a little bit and then it kind of stays, because by the time it starts to dip, I take another shot Monday and Thursday. Tons of information there. But the guys that are on gear, these guys that are doing it as a performance enhancing drug, they're taking that every day or every 2 days. Like because a lot of people will say TRT and they're like, oh, well, you're on roids, or what. It's like, they're not even in the same hemisphere in terms of the amount of stuff that they have. So I think in terms of trying to balance that out and trying to at least maintain some level of natural production, keeping that dosage at a quote unquote manageable level seems to be the method.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, basically one of the areas where I find men struggle actually in life in general is we're much less orientated to balance than we are to focusing on things. Right. So if we find something that works, we tend to double down on it. And a lot of what I do is working with guys who they've had success at work, so this has become their whole world now. And then they're not taking holidays anymore. Relationships might be breaking down around them. There might be financial problems. And actually, that's kind of the second myth that I want to talk about, is that I believed before I heard about Brad, which is this myth that men just need to talk. And I'm not saying talking's bad, but I really want to go into this and make sure that no one leaves this conversation with the impression that just talking on its own is a solution if you're a man, because it's
absolutely
not. And to do that, I'm gonna jump back into some UK statistics, because I think it's really interesting, right? Similar society, so we can still learn things from each other. I use loads of American studies all the time because, it's not that different, right? So in the UK, in the last 5 years, 79% of men say it's now more acceptable to talk about mental health. So that's good news, right?
Yeah.
It's moving in the right direction. 68% of men say that there's now less stigma around mental health. So, there's less shame, it's easier to talk about. And between 2010 and 2022, Men in the UK became 50% more likely to go to therapy, talking therapy. So it sounds like everything's moving in the right direction, right?
Right.
However, in the same time that men say it's much more acceptable to talk, and in the same time that men say there's less stigma, and in the same time we've become 50% more likely to go to talking therapy, we've also become 11% more likely to die by suicide.
Man.
Now, I am not saying therapy is a problem or it doesn't help. Of course, there's loads of evidence it does. But what I am saying is we can't rely on talking and opening up and emotions and talking therapy. We can't rely on that as the one sole solution, because it's not. And there was an amazing study by one of our leading organizations 11 years ago in the UK. And what they said is that generic talking therapy doesn't address the key psychological factors that are associated with thoughts about suicide in men. And they vary, right? There are all kinds of things, from lack of recognition to, lack of adventure, we could even say, financial problems, relationship problems. Traditional talking therapy isn't designed to deal with these things.
Right.
It's not designed to dive into how's your business functioning and how much debt do you have. That's not a question you're going to get asked. You're going to be exploring your childhood instead. And so there's a really lovely example of, rather than talking about a problem, I'm going to talk about a solution, right? Which is, years ago in the UK, not many years ago, about 2 or 3 years ago, we had an area which is called Bristol. It's on the coast. It's really nice. Some guys in the US know about it. It's really cool. It's a nice place to go. But in this area, the rate of male suicide was so much higher than the rest of the country. And the local authority there, they're like a state, basically. They're our version of a state. But they held up their hands and they were like, we don't know what's happening here. Like, someone help us. There's so much male suicide. And an organization called Second Step stepped in, pardon the pun, and they said, well, we'll try and help. And what Second Step did is they created a program which had 2 components. One component was problem-solving, solution-orientated conversations. So this is not open up, Kevin, and tell me about your emotions. This is, Kevin, what are your problems? What are you going to do about them? How are we going to fix them, right?
Right.
And the second part of this program was financial skills. So the guys were learning how to fix problems and learning how to address their finances. Well, 6 months after the program ended, the number of men in the group who were still having thoughts about suicide had halved. And when I read that study, I thought, well, that's a big typo. That can't be true, because I'd never read about any intervention for suicidal men that was that effective. But it's not a typo. It's just phenomenally effective. And I'm not saying it's the solution, but I'm using it as an example that if we're solely relying on therapy and solely telling men to talk, the problem is we've closed our eyes to all the other solutions that are out there, some of which are proven to be more effective, that we're not talking about.
Well, I mean, yeah, because most women will complain about men, right? That we only want to fix things. Like when the women typically, I think, and this is stereotypical, thing, but they want us to they want to talk. They are good at the talking and it's rewarding. And I think men in particular are like, let's fix the problem. And if you're describing is the case where it's like, this is the problem, this is the solution, let's move on. And then obviously the financial aspect of it, if they have debt or, that financial stress is always there, which is, I always find ironic about suicidal rates when it comes, and suicidal ideation when it comes to financial troubles. It's like, so what you're doing, those don't go away. Those get passed along. And if you're thinking you're worth more dead than alive, well, there's a suicide clause in every life insurance policy, at least in the United States. And, but yeah, that's amazing that just coming up with some very direct, it's not that talking is bad. It's that you need the right kind of talk therapy in order to do it.
Yeah. And that talk therapy might not actually be talk therapy. It might be financial skills.
Right.
And so something that's I think really worth exploring and really interesting is it's another hormone called oxytocin.
Mm-hmm.
Now, oxytocin causes problems if you're a straight guy in a relationship because you're in a relationship with someone who isn't a guy, right?
Yeah.
So here's the problems. When we talk about our problems, hold hands, cuddle, or have sex, our brain releases oxytocin. If you're female, oxytocin reduces cortisol. It reduces your stress. And it's really powerful. So this means if you're female, just talking about your emotions is therapeutic. It makes you feel better. Here's the kicker. Oxytocin is proven to not reduce stress in men. So we've got this weird situation, which is the whole world is saying you need to talk, you need to talk, you need to talk. And often men have an experience where they say to their partner, I don't think I need to talk, I need to fix the problem. But their partner's heard from the doctor, from the media, and her own experiences when she talks about her problems, she feels better. So she therefore will put 2 and 2 together and make 5, which seems logical, but it's like, I talk about my problems, I'm okay. You don't talk about your problems, you're not okay. Therefore, you'd be better if you spoke about your problems. Well, it's a bit like, it's the same logic as saying the dinosaurs didn't talk about their problems, they're all extinct. Therefore, not talking about their problems caused the dinosaurs to go extinct. It's like, yeah, they both exist, but did one cause the other, right?
Yeah, that's that correlation versus causality argument, right?
Yeah, exactly. And one of our best charities here in the UK did a study 11 years ago. And that basically what they came back and said is, it's not opening up and talking about emotions. The men who are most at risk don't talk about their emotions. And they definitely don't talk about their emotions regularly. But neither do men who have good mental health.
Right.
So if we're just going to tell men to talk about their emotions, we're recommending something that 11 years ago was found to be ineffective. And the problem with that is we're blocking out all of the really good studies that tell us what we should do that really works. This is all, when I talk on like podcasts and talks, I use all just like peer-reviewed stuff. But on a day-to-day basis, the things I see in coaching are even more inspirational. It's just, it happens with small groups of guys. It's not as persuasive as a study with 130,000 adults in.
I mean, I don't know. I think anecdotal evidence to me seems to, the whole peer-reviewed study validation is less enticing to me than it was 5 years ago. But yeah, I think the anecdotal side and hearing what other men are experiencing is really important.
And so, as an anecdote, when I first got into this, the first group of guys that I worked with, one of them, he was really depressed and he was 2 years out of work. He was an actor. He was 2 years out of work. And he's in a really, really bad place. And he didn't have the money for coaching and his friend paid for it for him.
Oh, wow.
He was a guy I'd worked with before. So, brilliant guy and a brilliant friend. And when we started working together for the first 6 weeks, he didn't do any of the things he said he was going to do. We were talking about the science behind it, but he wasn't using any of it, right? And then I said to him, okay, we're going to stop working together because you're not doing any of this. And he said, oh, hold on, I didn't realize you'd stop it. Okay, I'll do it, I promise. So then for just 6 weeks, he used the strategies that he and I had created for him, right? A couple of days into it, he felt a lot better. And the first week, he said he no longer felt depressed. But what was really interesting was by the end of week 6, he'd got 2 jobs with Netflix and 1 job with the BBC here in the UK. And he's one of the main characters in a drama that's on TV in the UK all the time.
That's awesome.
And that was the point where I stepped back. This was 2020, right? And I stepped back and I was like, hold on, what are we doing here? This was meant to be like getting men out of depression. That's why I got into this. But actually what I found is that for men, goal setting and performance is mental health. If you can set goals that inspire you and get them, you have good mental health. And if you don't know what you're meant to do next, or you can't reach your goals, your mental health suffers. Yes. It's not about emotions for men. It's about a sense of progress and purpose.
Which makes total sense if you look at, if you look at how we've evolved, gone through as a species, and just how we are as men in general. We're very goal oriented. Most men I know are, and by not achieving those goals, I mean, I have 12 brands across 4 different businesses, and then I have this Maxed Out Man thing, and then I'm a consultant. I do some TV stuff. So like I have enough, and I call it many roads to revenue, but if you put it in the context of what we're talking about, it's many roads to testosterone. That's what I'm going to start calling it, because I have an opportunity to be successful in, with a lot of different things, and they aren't all successful at one time. But I think you're really talking about, having the goal setting as a positive step towards mental health. Not, we're not solving the problem of depression necessarily by talking about depression. We're talking through, we're having successes that then deal with our depression.
Yeah. And then, it comes to a point where people are like, hold on, are you saying this instead of therapy? No, not necessarily. Like this is no substitute for therapy, but at the same time, talking therapy is no substitute for having a life that you want.
Right.
Talking therapy is no substitute for exercise. It's no substitute for sleep. It's no substitute for a good lifestyle or, being where you want to be in the world. It doesn't make up for it. The two things,
pharmaceutical do the same thing, right? Like we try to rely on pharmaceuticals to take the place of that stuff. I think that's Western society. The US is 70% obese now. And, everybody is on, and because of that, we don't sleep, we don't exercise, there's poor nutrition, and yet we want a pill to fix it versus, and, I tend to be harsh about it. It's like, get off your ass, stop eating Big Macs and fix it, on the back end, and then you can not have to take the pills.
Yeah. And do you want to know one last mad fact about male mental health and hormones?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, there's so much to talk about. You can probably tell, right? And we can't, just by focusing on testosterone, we're kind of skimming over a little bit.
Well, we'll have to do a part 2, maybe part 3 if you've got time later.
There you go. So, something else that is amazing is, for most of human history, only a minority of men who lived ever had children. In fact, we know from gene analysis, by tracking the Y chromosome, we know that 8,000 years ago, for every one man that became a dad, 17 women became mums.
Wow, that guy got around.
He was a busy boy, right? And then when I learned that made me wonder about the other guys, right? What happens to all the men who didn't have kids while that one guy was getting around?
Yeah, he got the banana every time.
Exactly. And so the other guys didn't have the banana, maybe they didn't have the partner, maybe they didn't have food, whatever it was, but we know they definitely didn't pass their genes on. And so when I learned about that, I thought that's interesting, because if we look at our closest relatives, the chimpanzees, the females organize themselves into social circles. It's not competitive. They support one another.
Yeah.
And the males organize themselves into a hierarchy. They do not support one another. They scheme against one another. They team up. They kill the other chimpanzees. They're always battling to get to the top. And in other primates that operate like this, as the males climb the social hierarchy, the level of serotonin in their brain increases. And you mentioned medication. Well, one of the ways that most of the antidepressants work is they increase serotonin in your brain.
SSRI, right?
Exactly. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And so I wondered when I heard that, does that happen in human males? And the answer is yes, it does. Studies have found that as men progress up the social hierarchy, the level of serotonin in their brain goes up. Now, low serotonin is associated with thoughts about suicide and with general anxiety and with an inability to act in accordance with your goals. So
self-sabotage, basically, right?
Exactly, yeah. We've got another vicious circle here, which is that if you're not climbing the social hierarchy, maybe it's because you're not good at goal setting. And if you're not good at goal setting and you're not climbing, then you have low serotonin, which means you're worse at goal setting.
And implementing those goals, right? Taking the steps necessary to achieve them.
Yeah, exactly right. And so this is just one of the many loops that men need to know about. Otherwise, we can't break out of them. On the plus side, like when I worked with that actor, lots of what we did is we broke down his goals and we looked at the things that were actually holding him back, and then we just removed the limits. So rather than putting the pressure on himself to, I don't know, contact 10 agents about work, his goal was just simply to put his running shoes on and go outdoors. And you think like, well, why would that help? Well, because you've just achieved your daily goal and you're only 10 minutes into your day. Do you know what that does to your testosterone, your serotonin, your mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. They go way up.
Yeah. When you've achieved your daily goal before 9 a.m., you can do anything now. You've got the rest of the day.
Yeah. And then when he goes to the audition, he has more confidence. He projects that confidence. Then he has higher testosterone than the other guys that are going out for the same part. Then he gets the banana and the other guys don't, right?
Exactly. And getting the banana means you get it next time as well.
Right. Yeah. That's, man, I mean, they talk a lot about goal setting and how important it is, but this kind of has a whole new light to it. And you look at guys that are, very highly successful, and you can see, if you start looking at them, across the board, you can see success breeds success, which we already kind of know about. But now it puts some actual chemical markers, hormone markers to that.
Mm-hmm. And then something that's really interesting to know is, again, from UK statistics, based on what I've said, right? As men advance in society, the level of serotonin in their brain goes up. And low serotonin is associated with thoughts about suicide. So based on what I've said, you'd expect for men at the bottom of society to be more likely to die from suicide, right? So in the UK, men at the bottom of society are 10 times more likely to die by suicide than the men at the top.
Wow.
And bear in mind, we know as well, there's no difference in the way they talk about emotions. So this whole, you guys, you got to get better at talking about your emotions. I mean, I'm not saying that there's not benefits to it, but it's not the sole solution to male mental health.
Absolutely. And I mean, and that would make sense because there's, the lower levels of society, they may have poorer nutrition. They may have less opportunity to exercise. There's, higher financial stress. So they may sleep less, all of those factors for sure. So if you were going to give kind of like, these are the, we kind of talked about the 4, right? Like, would those 4 things be the first step for most men that might be listening to this to say, how can I take the first steps to improve? Like, is it, sleep, exercise, nutrition, and vitamin D? Are those the things that we're pushing, or what kind of advice would you give to get started?
If I was going to give guys one piece of advice, I would say that you shouldn't feel bad for looking after yourself. Like, sometimes it's really natural because everyone wants security, but men want to provide security, right? We want to look after the people around us. We want to make sure our businesses function so our employees get paid. We don't want to let our creditors down. So what we tend to do is we do a lot like what Brad did, which is all the time goes into work. Well, that has loads of problems. One of the problems is if you're not sleeping, exercising, making your own food, if you're not getting out in the sun and you die, who looks after the people around you?
Right.
And actually, if there was one thing I wanted people to take away, it's the fact that if you're a man, looking after yourself is really important, because a female endocrine system is, as your partner's experiencing, it's cyclical, but your hormones will keep you happy and healthy at least until menopause.
Yes.
But if you're a man, that's not how hormones work. Your body is constantly measuring how well you look after yourself and how successful you are. And while you're looking after yourself, it will keep you alive. And if you stop doing the sleep, the diet, the exercise, if you think that you'll first achieve all your goals and then you'll look after yourself, then you are at massive risk of all the biggest killers of men, because your system is constantly assessing, are you that one guy in 17 who's going to get to have kids?
Yeah.
And if it thinks you're not, if you're the 16 out of 17, do we think they just sat around eating resources all day? No, I don't think so. I think your body shuts you down. And that's what people need to know. Guys, you have to look after yourself.
Yeah. One of the big goals for me with this whole thing is to get guys to be, take that one next step to be better than you are, so that you get to be the best that you can be, kind of a thing, which is, it's just, if that means walking 10 minutes today and you haven't ever, you don't ever get exercise, you're still relying on the, high school football thing that you went through, and you're still, the Ed Bundy philosophy, then yeah, just get up and go do something, work on yourself, and realize that the success breeds success for sure. I feel like I need to book some coaching time with you. How do guys reach you? I know you're in the UK, which is not a big deal thanks to the internet and some of these kind of things. So how do people reach out, learn more about you and what you got going on?
Yeah, brilliant. If you're interested in any of the things I've been talking about, the best way to get in touch with me is my website, which is themenscoach.co.uk.
Awesome. And that has links I saw to your LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram and all your socials too, so you can learn more about that. And I did notice that you have on your website some, if you're interested in some of the bibliography part of this, where you can read some of the studies. I saw that you have links to that. So if you're a science nerd like me, you can go in and read some of that. But hey, man, this has been amazing. I'm going to beg you to come back at some point in the future and talk more about this, or I have to fly to the UK and have lunch with you so we can sit down and talk about it. But so, all right, Ryan, thank you so much, man. Have a great day.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Keep doing what you're doing. See you soon.
Thanks.
If you're looking to really maximize your life and become the man you were made to be, head over to maxedoutman.com and get your journey started today.